Welcome to the Put On Waivers Media Group, home of the Put On Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
Yes. Trojan fans everywhere. This is the Student Body Right USC podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, and we are podcasting on the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful day out here in Southern California. You gotta love it. And there's never been a shortage of USC news. So we're gonna bring in Evan Desai. He can tell you where he does all his work. But first, Put On Waivers _ podcast is where you can find us on Twitter. The Put On Raiders podcast, which is also part of this. You can find all your Raiders stuff here as well, and San Francisco Giants stuff. We got that here. So we got USC, the Raiders, San Francisco Giants. We just freshly whooped up on the Dodgers 3 in a row, so we feel good about that. And then my Twitter handle is RTPOW podcast. So please check me out there, and then also rate, review, and subscribe. And we like those USC likes those 5-star recruits. We like those 5-star ratings on podcasts too. That helps us out a lot as well. And then if you're looking for us on YouTube, you can find us by Put On Waivers. You can find us by POW Media. You can find us Put On Raiders, Student Body Right, Put On Waivers podcast. All those ways you can find our podcast. So we have a guest, Evan Desai. Evan, where you're from, and where you're a writer extraordinaire. So how many outlets are you writing for?
Right now, I'm writing for Fansided. I'm doing their USC site and their Angels site. So Raina Troy for USC and Halo Hangout for Angels. Yeah.
So the Angels, the City Connect uniforms are pretty sick. So I gotta give them credit for that one. But we're here to talk USC football. So this has been one of the most unique off seasons that any college football team has had, much less USC. So what are your thoughts about Clay Helton? Nice guy, but it's time to go. The 4-8 ain't gonna cut it out here in LA. But what are your thoughts about Lincoln Riley making that big jump from Oklahoma to, Oklahoma's a top program too, but Oklahoma to USC, and try to restore, the glory of the Pete Carroll era?
Well, I think it's a perfect fit. I think Lincoln Riley is one of those guys that would fit everywhere. He's very personable. He's recruited really all over the place when you think about it. And, a lot of people think, oh, well, you're at Oklahoma, you can recruit Texas, but it's not that easy because you're competing with Texas, you're competing with A&M. Those are two huge brands that can recruit like crazy over there. And so, for him to do what he did at Oklahoma, 55-10, him going 4 straight Big 12 championships, never finishing outside the top 10. What he was able to do, people say that he was gifted a Ferrari. He was part of a great program, but he was part of that too as the OC. And obviously he made the first 3 playoffs he had when he was there. The last 3 times, they only made the playoff once. One of those years, they didn't even finish ranked. They had 8 wins that year. So, he certainly kept that train rolling. He actually made it even a bit better than what it had been. The type of coach he is he's an undisputed top 5 coach in the country. Like I said, I think he can do it in a lot of different places. I think the fit's right there. I think he kind of fits in with that kind of offensive identity that the great USC teams have had, kind of what the fans have been missing a little bit, quarterback university, all that. Lincoln Riley kind of threatened USC as far as quarterback university goes. And now he's the guy at USC. So I really don't think the fit could have been much better. And, there's a lot of, critics of Lincoln Riley, but, I want to know where they were the past 5 years, because I didn't really hear much about Lincoln Riley then.
Exactly.
And USC is a hated program. I personally would not rather have it any other way. I'm sure you are too.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
hated like this. I'll tell you that.
No question about it. And I think the one thing that I'm really happy about, people have mentioned in the podcast and some of the people who listen, the fence around California is being built as far as the recruiting goes. And that's the biggest thing. It's painful to see somebody go from Hawaii all the way to Alabama. Somebody, Bryce Young, all the way from California to go to to go to Alabama. Like seeing these quarterbacks leave the West Coast to go over there. Now, I think it's probably because they didn't trust the play caller. So if you get this guy has a proven record, just look at the National Football League and see who's playing quarterback, and you can see a couple of guys, playing wide receiver as well. Tight end, stuff like that. So you see all those play pieces for Lincoln Riley going forward. NIL has kind of changed the game a little bit. I think the funniest thing I like about this is now like Nick Saban is acting as if, and that people just went to Alabama because they love Tuscaloosa. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like nobody, like nothing ever happened underhanded. So now everybody can compete, everybody can go after and do what they need to do, NIL style. And listen, I have no problem with it. I don't know how you feel about it. I get your thoughts about it, but you only can play. I could talk about sports till the day I die. You can write about sports till the day I die, the day you die. But these guys can't play football for more than, the average NFL career is like 2.5 years. I know we focus on the Brady's and the Mannings when Manning played, and Aaron Rodgers, people like that, Russell Wilson. But like for the most part, those guys, the average guy only plays 2.5 years. We talked about NIL, how it helps USC, and also, some of these kids who are just may not make it as far as it goes in the National Football League.
Yeah, as far as NIL goes, you hear a lot of people complaining, but the thing is, this was made because players weren't getting paid in the first place. There were no salaries given there. The NCAA tried to have the schools allow stipends for players, but those stipends were very kind of uneven. So this proper solution is to be able to give players what they directly earn, name, image, and likeness. And the name, image, and likeness rules, or being allowed to make money off your name, image, and likeness, would prevent a lot of the problems that we saw as far as illegal recruiting and things like that in the past. And it's just simply what the players deserve. The amount of money that's going into college football in particular is obviously insane. And we've seen players of Olympic sports in college be able to go play in the Olympics and be able to go kind of make money outside of the school. But when football players try to make money outside the school, it wasn't allowed. So they're really just getting their due. They're really just getting what they've deserved for a long time and what they're directly making themselves. And there are a lot of schools or a lot of, fans of really all across the country, constantly complaining about USC's benefiting it from all that. But, the reality is that USC doesn't have an NIL collective. They lost Josh Carnley to an NIL collective. Yeah. And that's the reality. A lot of people just wanted to assume because USC is doing so well this offseason, that's all because of NIL. And that's a little bit ridiculous. And then, you mentioned, the Jimbo Saban kind of feud thing going on there.
Hilarious.
And, it's especially funny because, Nick Saban, and Jimbo pretty much alluded to it, has had a reputation of kind of giving guys money under the table throughout his entire career. And that conference in particular does. It's talked about a lot. Other players have come out and spoken about it in the past. So, I feel no sympathy for anybody who, feels upset that, Caleb Williams can get a Beats deal and he has these opportunities out here. And opportunities should be all over the place for really everybody at all different kinds of schools. And I think it's great because the players are finally getting their fair share. You don't want a situation where, you're a high level draft pick one year, then you get hurt, and then you don't end up making really any money in the NFL. You should get what you deserve when you get it and when you deserve it.
If you go to these games, you get to see, a number 2 jersey, a number 5 jersey. You get to see all these jerseys that, USC doesn't have names on the back of the jerseys, but we know who those jerseys are for. And those players are not getting anything for it. So, and I think at the end of the day, we're going to see the same teams in the top 10. So it's not really going to matter. It's not going to really matter. I know I had a show where I talked about the Pittsburgh, one of the guys who covers the Panthers, Pittsburgh Panthers, and he was going off about Lincoln Riley, threatened. He said if you ever saw me beat him up, all that stuff. You probably saw it yourself. I thought it was ridiculous. But I never thought a year ago, if you told me that the Raiders would get, because this is the Raider channel too, the Raiders would get Devontae Adams and the USC Trojans would get Jordan Addison, I'd have been like, dude, what are you smoking? But they did it, and they did it, and I think that that's an amazing addition here with Kalen Williams and Jordan Addison. What are your thoughts about Jordan Addison? Coming from Pittsburgh, coming to the bright lights of LA?
Well, I think that's another situation as far as, the perfect fit that I mentioned earlier with Lincoln Riley goes, with Jordan Addison. I understand he had a great quarterback last year in Kenny Pickett. He's got another great quarterback here. And this is a quarterback who he's already kind of developed a chemistry with in Caleb Williams, from their time growing up in the DMV. And, you got to put it in perspective. People say, USC is obviously wide receiver university. I don't think there's any debate about that. And I think this past season proved that. This last year was, in my opinion, the worst year in program history for USC. They still developed the runaway Blitnikoff award favorite in Drake London until he got hurt, obviously, a guy that put up almost 1,100 yards in 7.5 games that he was healthy in, and 7 touchdowns, 88 catches. And to be able to do that, obviously, in the worst year in program history, in my opinion, and is really says a lot about USC and getting him to be the first wide receiver taken in the draft. And now you're obviously adding Jordan Addison, who's at Drake London's level, a Blitnikoff winner of last year. He took it when Drake got hurt. So that's almost 1,600 yards at Pitt, almost 20 touchdowns at Pitt that Jordan Addison had, 100 catches. You're now letting him work with Lincoln Riley, who's hands down the best offensive coach in the country, and a program that just had an even better receiver when they were at their literal worst. So, I mean, just to be able to see him coming into this situation, it's really not hard to figure out that he did come here because of the best fit. He did come here for football reasons. And it's funny when you saw that radio host floating that rumor around about
$3 million,
that NIL deal, and how that's the most in the country. And then Paulo Uggetti at ESPN literally said, no, that's false. He could have taken more NIL money to go somewhere else. I'm assuming it was probably Texas, most likely. That was
it was finals were Texas and USC for his services.
Right, yeah. And then he chose to go to USC, and it was for the football reason because of all that USC's been doing this offseason. People seem to not really understand that. They don't really understand what they're seeing. And it's funny because they're the ones that keep trying to convince us that Lincoln Riley sucks. He's overrated. USC is overrated. They underachieve, all that. But, I mean, Jordan Addison knows what's up. It's LA. In LA, when they're on top of college football, is on top of the world. Let's just be honest.
And let's be honest, no offense to the Rams, and I know the Chargers moved to Los Angeles, but there's 2 pro football. There's always been a joke about two pro football teams in Los Angeles, and it's the Raiders and the Trojans. I mean, that is you're gonna still see more Trojans and Raiders gear in Los Angeles than anywhere else. And I tell you, whether it's it's Will Ferrell, Snoop Dogg, whoever, I mean, it's gonna be quite. I mean, I'm most likely gonna be at the opener, and I kind of can't wait to see the sites and how that work, how that looks, because it's gonna be like old times, and people are gonna get upset and mad about it. But I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, things come full circle, and he made a move that I think made a lot of sense. That conference is, that conference is really not a conference where you can win a championship. The way they play defense in that conference, where Oklahoma is just not a way you can get a championship level team. I think USC is a spot where you can't get a championship level team, whether you believe that or not. So as far as all the transfers, it's like your head is spinning about who's going where, who's leaving, who's coming, all this stuff like that. Who's got off scholarship, is on aid, all those things like that. The biggest thing that USC fans have been saying is okay, we're happy. We're not trying to be mad, but where's the beef? Where's the middle of the football field? Because Shaw up in Stanford in game 2 is even though Stanford looks like not going to be a good team this year, they find a way to make games close. And if he can run the football on you, he'll just sit in that 2 tight end and just keep running at you until you stop it.
Yeah, I mean, David Shaw seems to live for those games against USC.
It's kind of annoying, but he's a good coach.
No, absolutely. He's proven that. As far as the beef goes, and it's funny, there are a lot of fans obviously upset about this 2023 recruiting class not really having a lot of beef in it just yet. And I'd stay patient, as far as that is. But I will say, as far as the offensive line goes, there's a lot of kind of misconceptions about USC's offensive line. And people get upset when I say this, but USC had the number 1 offensive line according to PFF last year. Were they the number 1 offensive line? Absolutely not. But were they pretty solid? Yeah, they were. Yeah. And they just brought in Bobby Haskins, obviously, to be the left tackle. He was the ACC honorable mention last year, so he can play. You have Andrew Voorhees at left guard, who was the only lineman in the country to have a 90+ pass blocking and run blocking grade last year. And people don't like PFF, but he also didn't allow he allowed 1 sack all year. So, I mean, he can play. There's no doubt about that. And Brett Nealon at center didn't allow any sacks. At right guard, Justin Dietz did great last year. He really showed a lot of improvement. He was the 3rd highest graded guard in the conference. And I don't know if you saw, he was actually seen pulling a semi-truck with his own body in the offseason. So, you know, he's obviously improved his strength a lot. And it was already there because, remember, he was a center in high school, you know, and he's been able to prove that versatility to play guard. And then one thing about Cortland Ford at right tackle, I know he's not necessarily the most proven guy just yet, but he fits Riley's system very well because Riley's system favors really athletic big guys, really athletic linemen. And as a tackle, that would be huge. So to have him at right tackle or possibly even left tackle if he plays there, you know, it's a good systematic fit. And, you know, he has that experience from last year and playing well down the stretch last year. As far as the offensive line goes, I will admit it doesn't have a ton of depth, but it's a lot better than these other Pac-12 program fans are giving it credit for. And, you know, there's some national noise about it too. But no, it's much better than what a lot of people seem to think it is. I don't know if it's a strength on the team, but it's enough to be able to win. As far as the defensive line goes, that's where you may have problems. You know, obviously you do have Tuli Tuipulotu, which is huge. You know, make no mistake about that. I saw Athlon Sports actually had him as the number 1, or they had him on the first team, all defensive team for the Pac-12. I know that's off-season talk, but Tuli Tuipulotu can play. You know, everybody knows that. The issue is obviously going to be you have a lot of guys kind of unproven outside of that. And what I mean by that is, you know, some people watch this are going to say, you know, well, Brandon Peely, he's good. He is, but he's had a lot of injury issues in the past. Or Nick Figueroa, he's good, and he is, but he's had trouble staying on the field in the past. So that's why we really need a breakout season from Corey Foreman. I hate to put that kind of pressure on him, but, you know, that might be what it takes. He's going to be the X factor, I can tell you that. And, you know, it's a tough kind of discussion because, you know, he didn't show much last year. He didn't play much last year. And people are going to say, oh, well, he should have played more. That's on him. And there's some truth to that. So you're really kind of relying on that talent to kind of show through. I think he's being coached by the right guy in Sean Nua. But he's definitely going to be that kind of X factor. He's going to be the guy that really needs to step up if you really want to kind of see a high impact defensive line. Because if not, you're going to be relying on guys, like I said, you know, Nick Figueroa, Brandon Peely, guys who, you know, have injury history. And, you know, the backups to the tackle spots aren't necessarily the best. With all due respect to the depth that we do have, it's, you know, more guys that haven't had a lot of playing time in the past, like Jamar Sakona, you know, Earl Barquette, those kind of transfers that we put in. You know, we really need a breakout from Corey Foreman if we really want to kind of secure a strong D line.
Yeah. How important was it? You see, I remember so back to like kind of go like the Raiders and back and forth with the Raiders and the Trojans. Edgar Bennett, very, very respected wide receiver coach, stayed with the Raiders, even though the whole staff is brand new with Josh McDaniels. How important was it for the Trojans to keep the secondary coach Dante Williams? I mean, he came in and did whatever he could in that situation, but he comes over and stays, and I think he knows how to recruit. You know, all over for the defensive backfield. What are your thoughts about that? Him bringing everybody new, but kind of just keeping Dante.
People don't talk about it enough. I mean, you know, people seem to think, oh yeah, well, you know, the secondary was bad last year. I'm like, yeah, you know why it was bad?
He's not
because Dante wasn't coaching him.
Yeah, he was not the play caller.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Dante Williams had to kind of be thrown into a tough situation, you know, as the interim head coach, and he hadn't had any head coaching experience. So, you know, he was just, you know, kind of a little bit not as qualified for that position, but it wasn't necessarily his fault. You know, the program was in a tough spot. You know, but as you saw in 2020, you saw guys step up as far as, you know, the defensive backfield went. You saw guys play well. And, you know, so it's not that surprising when ITS and Pola struggled last year when Dante's not working with them one-on-one as often as he is. So that's definitely giant to be able to have him back, to be able to put him back in the role that he should be in and that we know he can already really thrive at, and a role that he's thrived at other schools too. So that's why, you know, people need to understand he's a proven guy at that position. And when it comes to who he is as a recruiter, I mean, his past also kind of speaks for itself there. He was, probably the best recruiter on the West Coast of Oregon. He's probably still the best recruiter on the West Coast here. I know Dennis Simmons, Lincoln Riley are obviously tremendous recruiters as well. But if we're being honest, if I could really pick any recruiter that we have on the staff, I think, the nod would have to go to Dante Williams as the number one guy.
Yeah.
And, you do have to remember, a lot of these guys, when it comes to the rest of the coaching staff, like you mentioned, a lot of guys are new. These are Dante Williams guys, a couple of these transfers, like Latrell McCutcheon, for instance, he's more of kind of like a Grinch guy. But I mean, still, he'll take the talent that Latrell McCutcheon brings to the table. Yeah. A lot of these guys that we're going to have in our secondary are players that Dante recruited, players that Dante has already worked with. So they're losing some guys. They lost some guys to the NFL in the offseason, but they're returning a lot. And a lot of these guys are players that he directly recruited. Even guys like like Sire Wright, for instance. There's a lot of recruits that haven't necessarily played a lot, but he's gotten a lot. He's been able to see a lot, and he was able to bring to USC back when they were in high school.
Yeah, no question about that. So we had Phil Robinson, who writes for LA Football. Kind of didn't. People were a little upset with what he said because he's a USC writer, but he said he didn't like this backfield. So, which I was like, okay. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion, which is fine. I'm not gonna, but it's kind of what your feelings are about it. After that, I kind of went back to the tape and I watched Travis Dye, and I just felt like, in this system, and I feel like he had a big year last year. I think they're gonna do some big things this year as well. Especially when you look at, you put Mario Williams on the field with Malcolm Epps. You got Addison, all these weapons on the field. Jerry Rice's kid. You can put all this stuff on the field, and then you want to run the football. It's gonna be hard to kind of put people in the box against USC running the football. What are your thoughts about the collection of running backs they got?
I think it's phenomenal. I mean, I understand that we lost Brandon Campbell. It's kind of like, okay, well, you don't have a ton of depth there, but, I do think they have, plenty of guys to be able to get the job done, because when you look at it, every single one of them has been productive in their careers. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Travis Dye, and he really needs no introduction. I mean, he led the Pac-12 in yards from scrimmage last year. He had almost 50 catches. He had 400 yards receiving. So, he can be a kind of dual threat guy, and he is a dual threat guy. And he averages 6 yards a carry for last year and his career. And so he's kind of proven himself. I think he's elite. He's definitely, a top, 20, probably, in my opinion, probably top 15 back in the country. And that's big. And, Raleek Brown coming out of high school, that was a huge, it was huge to be able to get him to go from Oklahoma to back to SC with Lincoln. And, he kind of needs no introduction as well, because, obviously, we've seen him at these camps, at these showcases. We already know what he is as far as a runner. We've seen him line up against, top tier defensive backs at these camps and see him run wide receiver routes. So, he can play, he can line up at multiple different spots in the field. So I really like how he can be used. And I think that Riley can really be creative with him. So I expect a lot of offense to be generated through him. Maybe not next year because he'll be a true freshman, but, in his USC career. And Austin Jones, he's done some big things too. I mean, he led the Pac-12 in touchdowns in 2020, 9 touchdowns. I mean, I also like that he's kind of improved as a receiving back every year. Like you said, we're going to throw the ball a lot. I think you can use him there in the passing game. And then, people forget Darwin Barlow has been very productive when he's on the field. He hasn't necessarily gotten a lot of playing time because, like last year, there was a lot of guys in front of him on the depth chart. And even at TCU, there was some competition for carries there. But, I mean, he averaged 4.7 yards a carry last year, 5.2 in his career. I mean, he's been productive when he's been on the field. So I'm pretty confident in him. I know he talked in the press conference about how last year's offense is a little bit boring for him. And he talked about how this year it's a little bit more complex, keeping him on his toes. And, I really like that situation for him. And, I think him as your fourth back really speaks to how it really is actually strong depth. And so, I'm a little bit surprised to hear that he wasn't necessarily too into the backfield over at USC. But, I think it'll be really strong. I think it's got a good future as well.
Yeah. Caleb Williams. I mean, obviously, this guy should be, if he doesn't win the Heisman, he's going to be in the Heisman candidate for this, especially with all these weapons here. What are your thoughts about him? And I really feel like, the guy is he's a leader. He's connecting with his teammates. I mean, I know everybody got Beats headphones from him because he's down with that company. He got that going on too. But just on the field, not a throw he can't make. Just can pretty much do it all. What's your take on Caleb?
I think Caleb's definitely a top 3 quarterback in the country. For me, it's Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Caleb. And then I think it's a huge gap after that. Caleb's special, like you mentioned, he's a selfless guy. That situation, people complain about NIL. He uses NIL to help out his teammates, to help out the basketball team, to help out the women's basketball team, giving everybody beats. I mean, he's a selfless guy. I love who he is as a teammate. From what's come out of camp, there's really been nothing but positive things to say about Caleb as far as who he is as a work ethic guy. If
it was negative, you would hear it. So the fact that there's a lot of silence around Caleb Williams, I'm excited about that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I love who Caleb Williams is as a person, but getting into who he is as a player, I mean, people seem to forget he was for a time he was a leading Heisman contender last year, despite not even starting until the second half. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's ever been done before. Maybe it was done, way before either of us were born, but I don't think it's ever been done before. To have that type of an impact that fast. We saw him over 9 yards an attempt last year, 27 total touchdowns, in half a season. That's pretty ridiculous. Over 5.5 yards a carry. He's about as good. He's going to win games for USC really based off of his talent alone. He's that good and he's that talented, but I do think there's some kind of room for improvement as far as that goes. He took 3.51 seconds as an average time to throw the ball last year, and that was actually one of the 3 highest marks in the Power 5. So he holds on to the ball a little bit too much because, as you know, he likes to go for those home run plays. We saw that right away when he played Texas. He always went for the home run. He always looked for those kind of deep bombs, and I like that about him. But, I do want to see him kind of trust the system a little bit more. Lincoln Riley's system is there's going to be somebody open because there's so many kind of complex routes. The defense is going to be confused. That's how Lincoln Riley's offense works. Somebody is going to be open, trust the system, and hit your checkdowns if you have to. Yeah. And as you know, last year you had a 29.2% quarterback fault pressure rate. That was also one of the 3 highest rates in the country. So his talent alone led to great stats. It led to a lot of winning. It led to a lot of excitement in his play. But as far as where he can go to, kind of maybe be the Heisman, like you mentioned, I think it's really going to come down to maybe getting the ball a little bit quicker. And like I said, kind of trusting that offense and, trusting your arm too. In that kind of 3-game kind of rough patch he had when they played Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State, and they lost 2 of those 3 games, he actually had 10 or more rushes in each of those games. And in all the other games that he had, he ended up having less than that, obviously. And his yards per carry doubled in the games that he wasn't in double-digit carries or not. Double-digit carries or higher. So if he can kind of trust his arm, use his arm more instead of kind of resorting to his legs and looking for that big play, I think that's going to be huge. It affected his passing too. I mean, in the games where he rushed 10 or more times, he completed less than 50% of his passes. He averaged 6.4 yards an attempt, which obviously he averaged over 9 over the course of the full season. So it affected his passing too. So he's just got to trust that system, trust his arm, relax, hit your checkdowns if you have to, make your layups. And I mean, I think he can take that next step as early as this year.
Yeah, staying on schedule is going to be huge. When you're on offense, if you stay on schedule, those big plays will come. I'm going to hit you with 3 things, and then we're gonna head out. Thank you for joining us here on the Student Body Right USC podcast. Shane Lee, and a breakout star on offense and defense. A kind of guy who we might not be paying too much attention to, but will have an integral part of the offense and defense this year.
As far as the defense goes, I'm going to say Rajon Davis. I think he's going to play really well in this defensive system because, Alex Grinch likes athletic linebackers, and I think that Rajon Davis, I don't know that he'll start now that Eric Gentry came over, but I think that he's a guy that obviously had a ton of talent in high school. He really wanted to come play with Corey Foreman. I think he's got good chemistry with the team. He was one of the first guys to get gold-plated. The whole gold-plated tradition that they're starting. I like who he is as a teammate. I like his work ethic. Obviously, he could have left. He could have left this offseason. He chose not to,
Yeah.
I think you can argue he should have had more playing time last year, and he stayed because he wants to be a Trojan. And, I really like what he showed in high school, obviously, and I do think it'll translate at some point, and hopefully that can be this year, and it certainly can be. So keep your eyes out for him. As far as the offense goes, I'm gonna challenge somebody. I'm gonna challenge a tight end, Lake McCree. I've been critical of USC's tight end room in the past, but Lake McCree showed down the stretch of the season what he is capable of. He kind of made some kind of wild plays. There was that catch against UCLA he made, they overturned. That was ridiculous. So he did some things late in the season that I don't necessarily think showed up on the stat sheet, and especially because Eric Coleman Hope was kind of the number one. But I think he did show some flashes. I don't know that he showed me promise, but I think he showed flashes. I think he'll be the number one tight end on the depth chart this year. And I do think that Lincoln Riley would like to use tight ends. Obviously, you saw him use Mark Andrews really well back in the day, and some other guys as well. So I'm going to say keep your eye for Lake McCree. I think with more opportunities, more confidence that he gained last year, he can be a big guy. He can be a breakout candidate.
No question about it. All right, that's it. I mean, that just summed up everything that we need to go in this short period of time. Evan Desai, right? reignoftroy.com. Really appreciate all the time you had with us today, and hopefully talk to you in the future. And then it's going to be a fun season. The off season we get closer and closer. I think that the counter on the website, on the USC website, is like 83 days until kickoff against Rice. So we'll see everybody getting excited about that, and we're excited about having you, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, man. It was a good time, for real.
No problem. Take care.
Yep.